Good evening, everyone. This is Simran Ahuja, your host for this evening. On behalf of Foodyaari, I extend my warm welcome to our guest speaker today, Miss Nirmala Medwal ma'am, and to the next webinar session of the Food in Our series organized by Foodyaari, a cloud web-based platform based in the domain of food science and technology. A little bit about Food in Our series. It is a series consisting of sequence of webinar sessions with eminent professional speakers from the food industry as our guest speakers. In these uncertain times of COVID, we have got this enormous opportunity to get the knowledge from the comfort of our own houses. So let's get to it. I present to you the topic for today's session, overview of sensory science and consumer research and the role in consumer-centric innovations, for which we have with us none other than Miss Nirmala Metwal ma'am. Ma'am is the senior group leader for Mondelez International, leading regional consumer science function for chocolate. Ma'am has also led the insights function of sensory insights for India, Bangladesh, and Nepal regions. These are but a few highlights in her long list of accomplishments. I welcome you, ma'am, once again to this session. Before handing over this webinar session to ma'am, I would just like to request all the participants and attendees to please post your questions in the comment section below and we'll get to them towards the end of this session. Thank you and over to you, ma'am.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much, Simran, for giving the great introduction. And I'm really thankful to the Foodyaari team for inviting me at this forum because this is a great opportunity for me to share my experiences, my learnings, my knowledge, what I have gained over the decades with all food technologists and respective students. So I'll start the session, and I'm just sharing my screen. Yeah. So let me know once you can see.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
So the today's session is about the overview of sensory science and consumer research and the role in consumer-centric innovation. I know in India, these functions, especially the sensory science, is niche, and now companies are utilizing it for developing the product. But it has a lot of power, and it is very critical tool for doing innovation and also sustaining the core business. So I'm going to take you through the basics because I'm not sure how many of you are aware about sensory science and consumer research and how we integrate these tools together. That's why it's very important for us to understand a little bit in basic about these tools and then how we integrate and then what are the advancement happening, and also I will touch base around the sensory marketing a little bit. So let's start with overview of sensory science. So, sensory science, yes, you may be thinking what's new. Okay. So, in past, sensory science was not a function before 1930. Yeah. So, what used to happen, the high quality products, whatever used to come into the market was evaluated by sensory experts, like you may know wine taster, tea taster, coffee taster, and all. Yeah, but what happens with economic growth and increased competitions, more products used to come into the market. So there was a lot of reformulation happening, lot of products was coming into the market, which were also driven by the consumer preferences because consumer had a choice to opt which one they want, right? So for that, it was very important to understand the sensory profile of a product and also the liking of a consumer. That's why there was a new challenge came to the product developer or to the experts. So what was happening at that time, it was very difficult to track the products what is coming into the market and also the quality control related things, and it was also very important to understand the feedback from the consumer what they want, yeah, and what is their opinion about the product. That's why in 1930 here comes the consumer science, the sensory science. The sensory evaluation started as a methodology or as a best practices to enable collection of more extensive and valid product information. Since then, we have a sensory evaluation which we use for evaluating the products. So, what is sensory science and what is sensory analysis? Because when I was in food technology, I was not much aware about sensory science. Yes, there was some, what you can say, a session around, or a 6 month session on sensory science, but it was not that much in detail. Yeah, so I think we never know what is the importance of sensory science and sensory analysis and how much important role it play in a FMCG sector. Yeah, so let's go through it and let's understand what it is all about. So sensory science is not something which is very difficult field, if you say. It's just using our senses or using human judges to measure the perception of consumer goods. Yeah, so it's a branch of food science. And what is sensory analysis? So the definition which you can see here is by IFT, and also ASMT also says the same thing. Like, it's a scientific discipline to evoke, measure, analyze, and interpret reaction to those characteristics of food and material as they are perceived by the senses of sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. In simple sense, sensory is just measuring the perception about the product using our senses. So that's a very simple definition of sensory analysis. Yeah, so it start with the evoke. So evocation happens with the stimulus, then we perceive it, means our sensory receptor perceive it, and it goes to the brain through our nerves, and in brain it get analyzed and interpretation happens. So let's start. What are our senses? How these senses contribute to the perception. And if you just think about today, what you had in your lunch, just think: did you leverage all your senses while while tasting your food or having your food? When you go back and just think about that, then you will realize that yes, if you have a great experience of your lunch today, definitely you would have applied all your senses. If not, maybe you may be disconnected. So let's start. What are our five senses and how they contribute to the overall experiences of the food? So start with the sight, then comes the taste, smell, touch, and hearing. And taste, again, we are like just calling it like basic taste, and also there are some trigeminal sensations. I'll talk a little bit more about that in later. Then smell. So I think most of the time we just feel okay, smell is all about nose, right? It happens through nose. No, smell can also happen through your mouth. Okay, that we call a retronasal order. So let's see how each of these senses plays a critical role while we evaluate our product. So through sight, we see the appearance. Appearance is all about your color, consistency, inclusion, whatever we see in a product. Overall aroma can be contributed by the flavor aroma, and also when the taste interact with the flavors, can give you aroma. Then flavor is all about the holistic experience. It's all about the combination of your taste and also the flavor components, as well as your mouthfeel and all. Then texture is all about your mouthfeel, which is like smoothness, mouth coating, sticky, dry, crunchy, creamy, and all. Aftertaste, once we have the product, then whatever remains, the lingering remains, is called the aftertaste. And also that is very important when we have a complete sensory journey or we want to experience a product end to end. So let's start with the sight. Yeah, so you may be thinking, yeah, what sight? So I think sight is one of the most important sense organ which we use in our sensory evaluation. Yeah, so sight means what we see, right? It's all about the appearance. So if you see appearance, it drives the purchase decisions. It's all about what you see, what the appeal, because it attracts you. So some of the time, you may not be knowing the taste, but still you buy the product because it's very appealing, it's very attractive. So most of our purchase decisions are driven by the appearance. That's why whenever you are either evaluating a product, whether you are thinking about any of the product you are going to buy, it all starts with the appearance. Appearance play one of the major role in purchase decision. Appearance, under appearance we have color. So color is also determine the quality of a food. Okay, so you sometimes you see that the color is a little bit faded or the color is a little bit dull. So that means when the color you feel is dull, then you don't feel the product to be exciting, or you feel okay, if it is dull means the flavor will be less, right? So color is again one of the important parameter. And appearance is a combination of a color, consistency, size, shape, and also the inclusions on the food product or any of the edible products. Appearance also helps you to gaze, right? So if you see, like, you want to see whether the product is ripe, whether the product is safe, because in case some you find some bubble, like in case of a beverage, if you see like in a fruit juice you find some bubbles on it, that means there is some micro contamination. So sometimes we need not to taste the products. By seeing itself we get to know whether it's safe to eat or drink, right? So it plays an important role while selecting what to eat, what not to eat. What is sight? So how sight happens, how we give the feedback on this. So it's about a neurological responses to the stimulus. So what happens, light fall on any object and that light get absorbed by the product based on the characteristic of product, and whatever get reflected back, it goes to a retina. In retina there are photoreceptors which we call cones and rods, and cone is responsible for your color, and from there it goes to the brain through the uh, uh, optic nerves, and from optic nerves brain gives us a signal, analyze and interpret and say okay it's yellow or it's blue or it's whether it's a dark or whether it's a light. Okay, so it's all happened through our receptors, through optic nerves, and then finally the brain give you what it is all about. So let's move to the smell. And smell is what we smell, right? The how the food smells. It's all about the odor. So smell is maybe positive, sometimes smell may be negative, or sometimes smell can be pleasant. So it's depend upon what kind of odor or molecule we have in a product. Okay. So smell also triggers hunger. So it's all about your the odor, the volatile compounds present in the food, and the volatile compound present in the surroundings. And smell is a very powerful emotional link. So you may remember that some of the aromas you may have smelled when you were a child. Okay, still when you get the same aroma, you remember your childhood. Yeah, so they get stored in our memories. Okay, so they stored as a memories, and whenever we get those again, they get again we reactivate them. So smell is all about the powerful emotional links. Yeah. And how it happens, so in our nose we have a nasal cavity, we have a hair like cilia, and these hair like cilia they bind these odor molecules, and from there it goes to the brain through the olfactory nerve, and then we sense the smell, and we can smell, and we have 10,000 olfactory receptors, which is a very very large number of receptors. That's why I think humans can smell a lot of odors, volatile odors present in the environment. At the same time, these smell receptors or cells are very sophisticated. That's why you get a fatigue compared to the taste one. So it's very important whenever you smell, your nose gets saturated and your these cells get saturated. So it's important to you know take some bunny sniffs and all before moving to the smelling some other products. Yeah. And very interesting thing about the smell in our nose is human can detect or very low concentration of odors, even ppt levels, whereas some instrument cannot do, whereas our nose can smell at a ppt level some of the off notes or off odors. So that's why our nose is very strong. Yeah. So so one trivia. So maybe when I was telling smell is important, so why smell is most important for product evaluation? I cannot see your chat, but I can tell you that maybe I'm not sure whether you are thinking the same, but yes, we can smell 1,000 of odor present in the environment. Yeah. At the same time, even before tasting, we can get to know whether this is micro contaminated or not. So that's why smell is one of the most important sense organ for product evaluation. So let's move to hearing. And I'm not sure, but I think hearing, some people may think how hearing can play an important role when we are eating a product or when we are evaluating a product, right? But hearing is again another important sense organ. Okay, hearing helps us to know the perception of the freshness and the texture of the product. Let's take example of a carbonated beverage. So when we open the can, if the fizz sound comes, that means we say okay it is having more carbonation or it's more fresher, right? At the same time, when take example, a simple example, when we open a tap in our winter days, the tap, when the sound is very hard, that means it's like when we open the tap, the water flow and then the sound is very hard, that means it's cold. And at the same time, in a summer, or maybe in when the water is warm, the sound will be less. We hear less sound. That means the intensity of sound is lesser. That means it's warm. So I think hearing also plays an important role to tell what is the characteristics of the product, or any stimulus whatever you are getting. Yeah, even when we get a sound, when we eat the chips or when we eat a cookies, if we are getting a crispy sound, a crunchy sound, that means we feel okay, it's fresher, or that means not soggy, right? It's not. So it's very important also when you are evaluating or even you are eating a product, it's important to focus on these important stimulus. Then touch is, yeah, touch happens through hand. Yes, for non-food products we can say okay, touch. Let's take example of our hair. Like we touch our hair to feel whether it's soft or rough, right? At the same time, in food, touch is all about your mouth feel and texture. It happens inside your mouth from your initial bite till to the aftertaste. Okay, so initial bite, you feel it in a palate, you feel in your you bite it, you experience in your tongue, then it also goes in your throat, so the aftertaste, so how it is. So it's all about the holistic experience of the product, especially the physical and the chemical and the rheological properties of the product happening inside your mouth. Is all about the mouthfeel and texture. Yeah, and mouthfeel and texture is very important for the holistic experience of the product, and it get affected by the temperature. Let's take example of let's take example of a beverage itself. Okay, so when you drink a beverage when it is chilled versus when you will drink that beverage when it is a room temperature, you feel the different sensory experiences. Yeah, so even you may see that some of the off notes in a product may be perceived at a room temperature versus when they were at chill temperature, right? So it's very important. Temperature plays a very critical role. So whenever we are evaluating the product, evaluating at a right temperature is going to be very critical. And the touch happens at two spaces. One is a surface response, another is a deep response. When it happening at the tongue, at a surface response, we get the experience of smoothness, thickness, and creaminess. Whereas when it happens at a deep response, we get more of a crispiness, chewiness, melting, mouthfeel kind of experience. Taste. Taste is, again, I think whenever we talk about tasting, whenever we talk about sensory, the first thing comes in our mind is taste, right? So we think that okay, sensory is all about taste. Taste is one of our important parameter, but it's not everything. Yeah, so taste, how taste happens. So we eat products, right? In those we have a molecule chemicals. Those chemical compounds dissolve in liquid or saliva, and we perceive the molecules, and these molecules then goes to our taste bud, and in taste buds we have taste cells, and from taste receptors they are taken to the brain by our nerves, and gustatory nerves, and there then we perceive what kind of a taste it is. So in simple thing, the molecule present in our food, they interact with the protein present in the taste receptors. Like for sweet, so sweet like sucrose, okay, so it binds with the protein into the taste receptor in our taste buds, and then we perceive a sweetness. Saltiness like NaCl, KCl, okay, they binds with the protein receptors present in the taste cells, and we perceive the sweet, the saltiness. The similar way sour and bitter and umami. So umami is again is all about the MSG. It's about the savoriness. It's all about the brothy, the meatiness kind of a thing. Even in our common products like tomato, even peas, we get the umaminess. And we have almost 6,000 taste buds in a human. And what happens when we are a kid, we have more number of taste bud. As we get aged, our taste bud, especially after 45, the number of taste bud get decreased. So that's why you may feel that when the person is older, the perception is lesser versus when we are in our early age. So you may be surprised that I was not talking about flavor, right? So because sometimes what happens, flavor and taste get, people get confused between flavor and taste. Even for taste, they call it as a flavor, right? But flavor is not just taste. Flavor is a combination of everything. Flavor is all about your tactile sensation. We are talk about the touch, the mouth feel, the texture. It's about your taste, all the basic taste. It's about your aroma. Okay, whether it's a retronasal or orthonasal. Plus, it's about a chemical irritation. I have not mentioned here, but the chemical irritations are called which are where chemical irritation is like your the coolness, dryness, coolness from mint, dryness from alcohol, then also the chili, the hotness from chili. So all these things when combined together, that gives you the flavor. You may get confused with the flavor notes, which we say, okay, the flavor house gives us a flavor, right? So these are the, like, we got a chili flavor. These are the top notes. But if we say holistically, flavor is a combination of everything. Yeah. So don't get confused with flavor and taste. So let's see how we experience our food. So food, when we say okay, taste. No, it's beyond that. Okay. For food, experiencing the food and having a great sensory experience, having a great delighting experience is consist of all these factors. So it start with the basic taste, it start with the flavor, it start with your palatability. It's about the texture, temperature, shape, sound. Apart from that, the food acceptability also plays a great role. That is all about your environment. Okay, where are you having your food, where are you tasting, right? Because if you want to enjoy your food, if there is a temperature that is high in that room, will you enjoy the food? I don't think so, right? And at the same time, habituation, your social situation, your culture, right? What you are used to of, what time you eat your food, right? What is your habit, what kind of food, what kind, and how much intense in your basic taste you want, how much the flavor you want. So it's all about this. Yeah, it's about your personal conditions like mood and health. If your mood is good, you will enjoy the food. If your health is good, you will enjoy the food. So I think when we are talking about experiencing of food, it's all about these factors. Yeah. So just think, and that's why when we go to a restaurant which is having a nice music and is having a lighting, and the food is good and it is presented in a nice way, we really enjoy that, right? So food is all about, experiencing a food is all about the taste, the flavor, the external environment, the habituation, the personal condition. So it's all about the holistic experience, not just the basic taste. So let's do one quick exercise, or maybe you can think about it. Yeah. So last time, whenever you had your cold or your nose was blocked, do you remember eating and thinking that your food had less flavor? Just if not, then in future, just think about that. Yeah. So why this is happening? This is happening because it's all about the interaction of the senses. Okay, so we will not enjoy the holistic experience if our one sense, we are not focusing or using our one sense. The similar way, when nose is blocked, that means we are not getting the aromas. If we are not getting the aromas, we perceive the flavor to be lesser. Yeah. So that's why whenever want to experience food, just use your all your senses, because it's all about the interaction of the senses. Let's see, also we also talk about seeing is believing, right? So let's take example of a potato chips. Okay, let's assume you are eating a potato chips. Okay, so we first see the chip. You may notice it has some any dark burnt spots. Next you touch it. Okay, you may notice it's greasy or it's thick. Yeah. Then you bring the chip to your mouth, you smell it, so you get the aroma. So you may get aroma of a seasoning, you may get a fried baked note. Okay, then you eat it and hear the crunch of the chip, and you probably also taste it. Okay, so you get the saltiness, you may get the additional flavor. So it's all about starting from your appearance till to the eating and also the aftertaste. So imagine if any of these experiences was missing, would a chip be the same? If you don't hear the crunch in your mouth, right? So if you don't hear the crunch in your mouth, you feel okay, you didn't enjoy the chip. The chip may be soggy or this is stale. So it's all about the start to end experience, and the sound also played a critical role here to tell about the chip freshness and also how the chip is going to be. Yeah. So we discuss about all our senses, and now I thought it's very important also to follow some good sensory practices for evaluating the product, because these are very very important. In case you are not following all these things, you may not get a right feedback to the products. Yeah, so there are four important criteria when we are evaluating a product. These are your evaluation area, that means where are you evaluating the product. It should be away from odor, noise, distraction. It should have adequate ventilation, well illuminated place, because if it's not like that, you may not get a right feedback on the color. And if there is a lot of odors around, then you may not get the right flavor and aroma of the product. That's why evaluation area need to be very important where you are doing that. Panelists. So panelists is the semi-trained or trained people who know the category, who know the products. Also, they are screened based on their sensory acuity. That's why we are calling them a panelist, right? And when they are evaluating the product, they need to be fragrance neutral. If their clothes already have a fragrance, they will not able to find out the actual aroma and flavor of the product. They need to follow the method and instruction. They need to be confident in whatever judgment they are giving. They also need not to cause distraction to other. No biases to be created by them through their facial expression or through any indication. Samples. So samples are also very important, how you are coding, how you are presenting, what the temperature and all. Method and technique. So always it is advisable not to do sensory evaluation after lunch because your senses are already fatigued. That's why it's important to prior to lunch, and also avoid tasting too many samples because your sensory senses get fatigued. And it's important to rinse your palate because you should not carry flavor of one product to the other. That's why these are the four important parameters when you are evaluating your products and giving feedback. Yeah, and another important thing is about how you should evaluate the product. So always start with appearance, aroma, taste, aftertaste, and then give your feedback. So don't just jump directly to the taste and give the feedback. So it's a holistic evaluation need to be done, right? So even when we go to the consumer, we ask them to start with the appearance and give the feedback from appearance, aroma, taste, aftertaste to the end. And even when you are having your food, anything, just start enjoying by seeing the product, then focusing on aroma, taste, and then just enjoy the aftertaste. If you focus on all those things, definitely you are going to enjoy your product. So let me take you through also different techniques of sensory evaluation, because these are the techniques which we use based on the objective of our test. Right. So generally we categorize these consumer sensory tools into two parts. One is the analytical, another is the affective. So in analytical is most of the sensory tools fit into the analytical one, right? So if you want to check the sensitivity means when we want to see whether the products are same or different, we use discrimination testing. That's like triangle test, odd one out. When we want to have some quantification, right, or scaling or ranking, then we use ranking, category scale, or ratio scale. And most important, you may hear in sensory is the descriptive analysis. Why we are calling it qualitative here? Because we have a language. We profile the product. Once we profile the product, we get a language. We have a language for each product, each category, and then we ask the panelists to quantify those differences. That's why you may hear about flavor profiling, texture profiling, quantitative descriptive analysis. So these all are the tools which you get used in a sensory evaluation. Whereas affective is all about the consumer. And consumer, we use a naive consumer. They are not trained. They are the category users or the brand users, the product users. They are a general population also. Yeah, we just go to them and just ask whether they prefer B, or no preference, or they accept or reject, or hedonic is all about how much they like it, the overall liking. We use different scales for that. Yeah, so and the analytical is more about the objective, affective is more about the subjective. And analytical mostly we use semi-trained or trained panelists, whereas in affective we use a naive consumers. So, as I discussed with you, that is objective is very important. When we are selecting any tool, is important what is the objective, right? So, in case let's assume we do any product development, and in product development we use different ingredients, right? And in ingredients we have different suppliers. So let's assume we want to change the supplier having the same specification, right? And our aim is that we are doing a silent change, so the consumer should not pick up the difference. So that time when we want to use a tool, the discrimination tool is the best one. Yeah, because we want to see whether the product is same or different, right? Our objective is to have a same product to be taken ahead for the launch, right? So that's why we use discrimination testing to say whether the product is same or different. If it is same, means the difference is not going to get picked up by the consumer. Whereas in descriptive test, in case in discrimination we feel okay, the product is different, but we want to know how the product is different, we use a descriptive test to understand what is the profile, how the product is different, what attribute it is different, maybe in flavor, maybe in taste, maybe in mouthfeel, maybe in aroma, right? So to go into deeper, we do a descriptive profiling. Descriptive profiling is using the in-depth language to understand why the products are different. And then we go to the consumer to test whether they are liking. Let's assume we have some differences, right? So we want to see whether the consumer like it or not like. If they are liking, how much they are liking. That's called hedonic test. So depend upon what is the objective, we choose the tools. And most of your productivity, recipe optimization, and even supplier change and all discrimination tests, we use discrimination testing in industry. And for understanding the sensitive profiles, understanding the competitors, what their profile is all about, we use descriptive test. And to understand the consumer liking and whether they are preferring or not, we use the hedonic test and other consumer test. So why sensory evaluation? I was talking a lot about sensory, the senses, but why? Why should we use that? Yeah, why the industry is using it? Okay, sensory evaluation is very very important because it reduces the uncertainty. It reduces the risk. Okay, so to get reduce the risk of getting failure in the market. It helps us in decision making whether we should go ahead or not. Yeah, so sensory plays a very critical role when done in a right way, right? And it's also ensure a cost efficient delivery of a new product with high consumer acceptability. That means, if we really want to we have a 2 3 4 recipes, right? And we really want to take it to the consumer, but we really don't know how close, how far they are from each other. So doing a sensory evaluation and picking up the differentiating product and taking to the consumer can reduce your cost. Or sometime it also helps you to give a confidence that maybe these differences are good enough for consumer to pick up if I'm improving my recipe. Or maybe if I want to have a differentiating recipe against our competitor, if I'm doing a sensory evaluation, that gives us a chance to say, okay, we're having a differentiation against a competitor, let's go and test with the consumer. Yeah, so I think it's sometimes it get used as a decision making tool, sometimes it gets used as a screening tool, sometimes it gets used as a what you can say an additional tool with the consumer testing. And why we are doing sensory evaluation with the humans, why panelists? You may be thinking about what about the instruments, like you may heard about e-nose, e-tongues and all, right? But one most important thing about using human as a sensory evaluator is because at the end our consumers are also human beings. Okay, and when they evaluate our product, they are also using all their senses. So when we are using human as a panelist, we are also evaluating using our senses, but in a neutral way, right? And that's why the replication and the chances of getting success is higher when we use panelist, human being as a panelist. Secondly, human being can detect off orders or any any aroma at a very very low level, where sometimes the instrument cannot. Yeah, so in case of quality control and all, if you really want to avoid issues in the market, panelist or human being is the best way to use as a sensory evaluator. And the final thing is instrument cannot measure your liking. Yes, in a sensory we say let's be neutral, but sometime we will get to know what can work with consumer, what cannot work with consumer. We know what is a good sensory profile, what is may not be liked by the consumer, what are the off note we are getting, whereas the instrument will not tell you all about this. That's why doing sensory evaluation with human being is the right way for coming up with the great products. How is sensory evaluation get used? Okay, so there are two things. One, I'll tell you about the food companies, the FMCGs. Another, I'll tell you about the academia. So it's all how the sensory scientists work. Yeah, in food companies, sensory can be used across end to end. So from your product development to a quality, even for marketing. Yeah, sensory evaluation help us to know what consumer like and why. Because yes, we go to consumer, we understand what they like, but why they are liking, sensory can help you to understand that. And also, if consumer can tell a difference when they change a product, so in case we want to change any recipe, anything, but we don't want to communicate to the consumer, sensory can help you to tell, okay, whether this difference can be picked up by the consumer or not, whether the product is within the specification in quality control. So when we release the product, if we are doing sensory evaluation, it helps you to say, okay, whether you have released the products within the specification or some of the products or batches are out of specification. Yeah, sensory can also help in marketing for the claims. Okay, also for sensory marketing. Yeah, so sensory is really really very important from product development point of view, from quality, from marketing, even from the production point of view, because in production we will get to know what are the batch variations if we do a proper quality control checks and do a sensory evaluations, right? In academia, sensory scientists are trying to understand how senses work. They're understanding more about how the senses responding to the stimuli. They're doing also working upon the advanced methodologies, advanced technologies, because as the consumers are evolving, as we have a lot of option available in the market, what are the different tools, techniques, and how we are also, our senses are also evolving with time. So they are working and doing studies on that. Also, they are improving the testing methodology. I also put one slide, maybe, because whenever we think about sensory, what should be the bare minimum requirement if we really want to have a sensory evaluation in our, while developing the product or in our wherever we want to do that. Okay, so for that, the most important thing is the panel leader, because we need a person who moderate or lead the panel. We need panelists, either semi trained, trained, or group of people who are screened based on sensory acuity. We need samples, the three-digit code. Three-digit code is very, very important in sensory. It's a part of best practices. So whenever you are doing sensory, just don't mark as A or B. Always try to give a randomized three-digit number. Sensory rooms and booth are important because this is the independent for the independent assessment and also for the neutral environment. Software, we need different software. There are a lot of software available in the market, and every industry, every company use different software based on their ways of doing things. Yeah, and for sensory, it's also important to have this statistical analysis, because we are talking about data, we are talking about the robustness. So that's why doing a statistic analysis on the quant data which we are getting from the trained panel is very very important. Yeah, so these are the bare minimum requirement for conducting sensory in a right way. What are the applications of sensory test? Okay, where we can use it. So as I discussed with you, we can use it in product development, whether it's a new product development, whether you are improving the product, whether you are changing the recipe, whether you are including a new supply, anything. So in end to end in product development we can do. We can also do in a packaging. So product development, packaging, even in a process, right? We can use the sensory test. Quality assurance monitoring, the raw material, the semi-finished good, and the finished good, whatever going out from the factory. Sensory evaluation can be done. With the help of sensory evaluation, you can, a lot of time you can minimize your risk of sending some of the batches having an off order, off note into the market, which can help you to reduce the consumer complaints. Yeah, and it may have a big impact on the brand in case if you don't do that. Shelf life testing, for how many months we can claim the shelf life based on their sensory, you know sensory or sensory profile of the product. Cost saving, recipe optimization, complaint, national international market screening. That means if we really want to understand what is the profile of product in a particular category, there are a lot of launches happening in the market, right? We have a market flooded with a lot of brands. So if we really want to understand what is the profile of each one of the product in India, within India, outside India, and what inspiration we can take, how can we learn from whatever launch is happening, and how can we develop a new product based on that, and how can we understand whether the consumer are liking it or not. So all these things can be done using a sensory test. So, in a nutshell, sensory can help you to understand the competitor product, help us to understand what are the which of the product is salty, sweet, basic taste. It can help you to whether when you are changing your recipe, whether the consumer will find the difference or not. What does the consumer like best? And in case you want to test some product in consumer test and you want to see whether the consumer will perceive a difference or not, you can do it through sensory before going to the consumer test, as well as also how what is the influence happening on the product characteristic when you are changing the storage, the process, the ingredient. I think sensory can help you a lot. So let's move to the another topic about the consumer research or consumer test. So, what is consumer test? So, as sensory was about semi-trained and trained people, consumer research is all about going to the naive consumer. Consumer who are consumer, we are a consumer who is consuming the product, who is consuming the category or the brand, right? So, going to them, checking with them what they like, what they don't like, why they like, and taking our product, getting a feedback from them, yeah, and understanding their behavior, their emotional response, and how we are delivering the functional benefit to them. So it's all about going and checking with consumer and taking their feedback. So there are two types of consumer test. So one is quantitative research, another is a qualitative research. So quant. So when we talk about quant, it's all about number, whereas qual is all about words. Okay. Quant number means we go to the consumer, we go to a very large number of consumer, we ask them whether they like it or not. So it's about getting the responses and quantifying them. And it's not going into detail, just asking whether they like it or not liking, whether they prefer it or not preferring it. So it's more about the quant, it's more about the numbers. Okay, and we already have a hypothesis and we are testing with them. Okay, it's yes or no kind of a thing. And we are making a decision using that data. Whereas in call, we go into detail. It's all about understanding what, why, when, how, with whom. So it's all about that. It's about understanding in detail why they are doing a particular things, why they are following a particular behavior, because that help us to understand, also to decode what exactly the particular product mean to them. Okay, also when we are thinking around a new idea or something, it helps us to understand what is the need, what are we missing, what kind of a product we can bring to them so that they buy us. Yeah, so call is all about the depth, in-depth understanding. Yeah, and quant can be done with the we do it with the less number of a consumer, whereas quant we do with the larger number of a consumer, because it's like a screening or a validation kind of a test. So let's little bit understand more on quant. So quant, the answer which we are going to get is whether the product are same or different. Yeah, and we generally use a two types of test: acceptance or hedonic. So where we understand the liking about the products, and we also do the preference to understand whether they prefer A, prefer B, or there is no preference. Okay, that helps us to make a decision which product need to be taken ahead. It can be done at center location, means we call consumer at one particular place and ask them to evaluate the product, or we give the product to them in home and ask to evaluate the product in their normal scenario or normal home usage testing, means how they consume it. So it's like more of a real or natural environment they are evaluating in home, whereas center location is more of a control kind of environment. So based on the category, based on the product, these kind of a tests are designed. And you can see this scale here, like we ask from liking scale from they dislike extremely to like extremely. So based on what they are finding, they score score in the scale, and then we quantify the data. And qualitative, as I told, is help us to understand your consumer in depth. It helps us to give a new insight into how they use it, perceive it, think about your product and brand. Call is mostly used for the exploratory work, advertising work, concept creation work, new product development, research, packaging, and all this kind of a work where we really need to understand consumer in detail. We do a qualitative research. And qualitative research can be done in different ways. Okay, either we go one to one, we go and interact with the consumer one to one and do in-depth interviews, or we call 4 or 5 people at one place and just discuss with them. That's called a focus group. Or we go into the consumer house and observe how they are doing things, how they are preparing the samples, how they are, their behavior. Mostly it's all about observing and understanding their behavior, and then make digging the insight from there. So, qualitative research, as I told, is all about peeling an onion. Okay, so going into deep into a subject, understanding what they mean, what they need, what they want, what are the beliefs, values, perception, how their culture has an impact, what they are doing, and if they are doing a particular behavior, why they are doing that. Okay, and what how much they know about the category, the product. Okay, what are the conscious and unconscious emotional drivers, what are the shared meanings and norms, what people say and do. Because sometimes people say something, but when you go in home and observe them, they do something differently. Yeah, because and that is all about observation. So call is a great tool when we want to understand the consumer, and that is the real tool to help us to understand the need, and based on the need then we can create a product which can fit into their daily routine. So qualitative research can get you closer to the consumer, and this is one of a great tool to understand the consumer. What are the application of consumer testing? Yeah, we talk about sensory. Now let's see where can we apply consumer testing. So consumer testing is helpful in identifying and NPD new product development opportunities. Let's assume we want to understand what consumer need is. Okay, but we don't have any product. But based on the need, then we come back and decide, okay, what product can be launched? Or if we have a current product, how can we extend that product further based on the consumer need? It helps us to understand what sensory attributes drive higher liking and lead to dissatisfaction. Screening and choosing the best product for further testing or for launching. Okay, which one is the best, like which one is the preferred versus competition, which is fitting with the brand, which one is having the best functionality. So all these things help us to decide and make a choice to go further and launch the product. Also for product maintenance, like, so if you are changing an ingredient and a process change we are doing, right? And in case they are different, but if the consumer are accepting them, can we launch them, because we are changing the process and ingredient, whereas the consumer are used to our current product, but whether this difference is acceptable or not. So we can understand that through consumer testing. Competitive benchmarking, how we are performing against our competitor, whether we are more liked or less liked, more preferred, less preferred. In case we are less preferred, what is our objective, whether we want to beat our competitor or we want to be better than our competitor. So that we understand through consumer testing. We also understand market potential. We also understand on the advertising claims. So whether the whatever claims we are doing, let's assume you go to the consumer, you have two products. Yeah, one is having more creamy, another is having less creamy. So the or maybe the current is having optimum cream, whereas the new one whatever you have created is having more cream. So then you have an opportunity to say, okay, I'm more creamier. Okay, so more creamier than the previous one, kind of a thing. So you can use consumer results into making a claims. So how we use, so we talked about consumer, we talked about sensory, and both are giving us some data, right? So do we have an opportunity to merge them together and come to a conclusion and to say, okay, these are the product drivers of liking, or this is why the consumers are liking? Yes, we do it in a consumer research or consumer science, right? What we do, we have a sensory data which we get from the highly trained panel, and we have a consumer data on, and that is the liking. So when we merge them together, or when we have both of these data together along with an article also, we understand why the consumer is liking a particular product, or why they are preferring it or ranking it as one. What is the reason behind that? Because we already have a sensory profile here. So when we merge both of them, then we will get to know, okay, why, whether it's like more of a salty, or maybe it's more of a onion note, or maybe a particular attribute is higher in this product, that's why they are liking it. Yeah, so once we get to know that, that is an opportunity also we can communicate into our claims, or maybe that's the opportunity that can be our signature of our products. So that's very important, that how we merge sensory and consumer data together. Further building on that, uh, it's very important to have a do a preference mapping. Yeah, so we often do a preference mapping where we combine consumer and sensory data to generate the insight. So how we do that? So we have a set of products. The same set of product goes to the sensory profiling by the trained panel, and the same set of data goes to the consumer. Yeah, so consumer gives their liking, sensory panel or the panelists, they profile the product, and the profiling, what they do is a quantifying, means they are saying, okay, let's say flavor they give some number, then for X product 10, Y product maybe 20. So based on the intensity they profile the product. When we merge these two data together, we get to know a preference map. And the preference map is all about the drivers of liking. So preference map helps you to understand why this product is getting liked because of XYZ attribute. Okay, let's assume, I'll give you example of, okay, I'll give you the example of chocolate. Let's assume consumer like the chocolate because of the overall liking is high for X chocolate because of the creaminess, more sweetness, more cocoiness. Yeah, so what we can say, what is the drivers of liking for the chocolate is the creaminess, sweetness, and the cocoiness. So that we understand from this map, and then this help us to optimize our product, to come up with a new product if we really want to capture the, we want to have a product which is having a high consumer liking. Yeah, so let's see how we do that. So we have a trained sensory panel, we get sensory data. We have a consumer data where we are getting their liking scores. We merge them together and we come up with a preference map. And in preference map, higher the overall the attribute which are closer to the overall liking are the one which are driving the liking for that product, whereas which are opposite to that, that means they are driving the liking down. And in case they are in our product, we need to reduce them. Whereas if the liking data is closer to the attributes like the fresh, okay, freshness is helping them to drive the liking, whereas green note is helping them to decrease the liking. So if I want to have a product, I want to have a product with higher fresh note versus green note. Yeah, so the consumer are liking more fresh note, and if my product is having green note, it is decreasing my liking. So if I come up with a new product, the new product need to have a fresh astringent note, whereas it if my already product existing in the market like a P1, I need to reduce the bitterness and greenness to improve the liking to go to P2. So this is how this is how the this consumer sensitive preference mapping helps. Why preference mapping? What is the use of doing preference mapping? So preference mapping help us to answer a question like, what are the most important sensory attributes for consumer liking, as I shared with you. What are the opportunity for product optimization? In case we do the preference mapping and our product sits in the another coordinate where the overall liking is not there, so that line is overall liking line is not there and it is sitting in the opposite, then we have a lot of opportunity to improve our product. Whereas if our product is fitting into near to the line of overall liking, that means consumer are liking our product because of XYZ attribute. Yeah. And also we can get a segmentation, because it's not always important in one market that you will get all the people are liking the same product. Yeah, we may have X number of consumer liking a particular attribute, a product with a particular attribute, whereas Y set of consumer will like a particular attribute with a particular product with a specific attribute. Okay, let's say a green tea. Okay, so maybe some consumer like green tea with a bit higher bitter note, more green notes. Whereas at the same time, there are some consumer who are not used to of a green tea. They may like less bitter note, and they may like a little bit more of a floral kind of a thing. So that kind of a segmentation you will find into a market, and this often happens even within the country, within the cities, within you will get this kind of a segmentation. Then you have to decide which segment need to be targeted based on where the brand you want to take it. Yeah. And also sometime, is there a potential for new product? Because if you see, there may be the overall liking is there, our product is not fitting anywhere. So do we really need to create new product for that particular segment, or can I move my this product, optimize the liking by working on a particular set of attributes and help to increase the liking? So it depends upon what you want to do and how you want to play into that market. So let's talk about what are the differences between sensory and consumer test. It's just a summary kind of a thing. So sensory is more about a product oriented and objective. Consumer test is more a consumer oriented and a subjective, because consumer never going to tell you what exactly they like. They say it's good, it's bad, or is taste अच्छा था, taste बुरा था. And that is not going to help the product developer to optimize the product, or that is not going to help the product developer to say okay what they need to improve upon, right? That's why doing parallelly the sensory evaluation help us why they're saying it's good, why they're saying it's a bad. And sensory is about when respondents are considering the interaction between the sensory or the senses and the product, whereas consumer research is all about when they are evaluating the product in their normal way, or there are a lot of external validity also happen through the consumer. Yeah. Sensory is done with a limited size of panel. Consumer tests happen with a large size sample. Sensory training is required, no training is required in consumer research. Specialized terminology, as I was talking about the language. Language means like if I want to describe a cookie, okay, so in cookie we may have a crispy, crunchy. We talk about, if it is a butter cookie, so butter aroma, butter flavor. We talk about milky aroma, we talk about creamy aroma, we talk about, appearance, right? Whereas in consumer, they may not have that terminology. There is no standard terminology. They use their own terminology. Yeah. Sensory we do with products, and consumer researches can be done with or without products. Yeah. Sometimes we just go to the consumer, talk to them, understand them without a product also. Sensory test happens in a blind product because we don't want to have an impact of brand, because it's all about the blind product evaluation. Whereas consumer test can be done blind and branded. Sensory happens in a booth or in a neutral environment, where a consumer test happens in a more of a natural condition. Sensory we give instruction, whereas in consumer research is mostly the way they are consuming, the way they are using the product at home. So these are the key differences between both sensory and a consumer test. This is one of the most important slide about consumer centric innovation. So as we all know that when any innovation is happening, if it is happening with consumer, keeping consumer at the heart of whatever we do, those innovation are going to get success, right? And there is a data saying that around 60% more success are those companies which use consumer centric innovation, which are doing consumer centric innovation. Yeah, why this is important? Because whenever we are doing any innovation, it's important to understand who is our target group, what is their need, why they will buy our product, why they will spend extra money to buy our product, what need I'm fulfilling for them. Yeah, how I'm solving their problem, how I'm motivating them to buy the product, and how their life is becoming easier when I'm providing this product. If we are able to answer these questions, I think then we are telling, yeah, we are a consumer centric, because we understand our consumer, we understand the need. Yeah, we understand the emotional link what we are providing to them by providing a particular product. So it always start with decoding the consumer need, right? So that's why whenever any innovation is starting, it's very important to talk to the consumer, and consumers should be part of your innovation funnel from start to the end. So when we are doing ideation, it's important to go to the consumer, to talk to the consumer, to understand the trends, what's happening, doing a lot of core research, doing ethnography, doing sensory benchmarking about the category. If you are thinking around going to a new category, or you are thinking around to launch a product, if already there are other products in the market, Okay, because you don't want to be the same, you want to have a differentiation, right? So it's all about understanding consumer, understanding whatever the existing product in the market, understanding the category, understanding the trends. Why? What? Let's assume we create something, but the trend is going to evolve. Okay, with time the trends is going to be more of a more less like we are talking about indulgence today, maybe in future it is going to be health and well-being, right? So I think it's very important when you are considering your ideation phase to know all about these things. Doing a detailed, in depth understanding on consumer, the market, the future is going to be very important. And for all this innovation funnel from start to end, consumer and sensory tools are your way to help you. These are the tools which really helps you in each of your innovation funnel. So once you do that, you do a competitive analysis. Then, one in case you are coming up or going to go into a new category, you need to understand what can drive the consumer liking. Okay, what are the drivers of liking for this particular category? You do a consumer preference mapping. Then you also need to understand in your feasibility phase how this, if you are looking for a particular technology, how it influences the sensory characteristic, how it is going to influence the consumer liking. At the same time, your raw material. So you understand all these things in a feasibility phase. Then you develop, then you do a recipe development. So once you do a recipe development, you check with the consumer, you do a sensory profiling of that. Then you check along with the, because it's also very important how it is fitting in, fitting it with your brand, your communication and all. So you do a complete full validation test of your full bundle, right? And at the same time, the product also undergo through self life. So we do need to claim a self life, right? So self life study is also important from the sensory point of view. And finally you launch the product. And once the product get launched, again you do a competitive benchmarking, understanding how, where your product is against a competitor, whether you are preferred, liked, or in case you feel that you are not winning against a competitor, then you need to do a reformulation based on the strategy, right? Then finally, in case the product is in the market, if you find some issues in the quality related thing, then sensory can also help you in your troubleshooting. So this is the end to end of an innovation funnel, and every company has different ways of presenting this innovation funnel, but this is the basic of innovation funnel, and how consumer and sensory tools helps in the innovation funnel end to end, and how can we drive the consumer centricity through the innovation funnel. So that was all about consumer centricity in innovation. Going further, we are just talking about more of a digital, right? We are in a digital era, so we are also evolving. So consumer and sensory science is also evolving with that, because evolution is very important. If we use the old traditional tools, we may not able to get the right insight, right? So that's why there are few digital tools which I mentioned here, which are currently getting used in the industry. So, like the digital ethnographies, that means previously we used to go to the consumer, observe. Even ethnography, when we do in detail, is all about staying with the consumer so that we understand more why, from end to end, from when they get up till they sleep, why they are doing, what they are doing, when they are doing. And also we get some insight from that, right? Now we can do digital ethnography, we can observe them in a videos online. And like AI, so artificial intelligence is another trend, right? In consumer sensory science, also, it is getting used for doing online video interviews, online chat based interviews, and AI is getting used a lot in all the consumer researchers now. Eye tracking is going when the eye tracking is another tool which uses your, when you go to the shopping mall, or when you go for a shopping, how you see the product, for how long you stare the product, all that tracking happens through eye tracking. Then facial coding is all about, how you measure the human emotion through the facial expression. And that helps you, like, okay, when you see a product, are you happy, or how your facial expression is coming on that part. So this again help you to understand more the consumer, versus when the consumer write or give you feedback, versus when the reaction. So it's all about understanding the reaction, the instant reaction of a consumer to the product. Then virtual reality, augmented reality, these are the again another important advancement happening in a digital era. So virtual reality is, we see, a lot of even and digital marketing, it is happening. When you are having your food, some of the restaurant, they are trying to create the environment like, you are having your meal but you are sitting somewhere else, or maybe you are maybe in a some nice place, or some maybe you are sitting in Paris, you are having your food here. So it's all about how can you enjoy the environment. It's all about having the sensory experience with your environment. So they are trying to create these kind of experiences. And leveraging neuroscience, a lot of neuroscience you know tools are getting leveraged for consumer researches, like like you can have facial like EEG, and you may also see facial MRI kind of a thing, even brain scanning. So all these kind of different tools are getting leveraged to get more insights. Or currently, because the traditional tool is all about the conscious, and now we are doing a lot of advancement, so we want to understand what is happening in a consumer mind when they are unconsciously thinking and making a decision, right? So that's why a lot of neuroscience is getting leveraged to understand in the deeper on the consumer choices, and what is happening in the subconscious level of our brain. So another very interesting topic which I thought to include in this webinar is about the sensory marketing. Because sensory marketing is not much talked, but it has a very high potential, especially if it's created in a right way. So you can see sensory marketing helps us to engage all our senses for selling a product. So when the brands are doing sensory marketing, what they are doing, they are influencing the consumer perceptions by using multisensory experiences to build positive emotional connection. Right. So here you can see an example of a Starbucks. So Starbucks is one of the company which is very successful in sensory marketing. Yeah. So if you go inside the Starbucks, what drives you to sit there? It's all about the fresh coffee aroma, the taste, right? So that's why Starbucks is doing very well in sensory marketing. Even they stopped selling their eggs because it was interfering in their, aroma of the coffee. They are doing it very well. Another company which do is Apple. So there are a lot of companies, they really directly or indirectly doing the sensory marketing. And why they are doing so, what is the impact of doing sensory marketing? So sensory marketing, as I told, is all about creating the experiences. It's all about engaging all the senses. And when we all engage our senses, that help us to increase the brand loyalty. Consumer are willing to buy your product. The repeat purchase happens because you are giving a nice experience to them which is long lasting, right? And also brand recalls, because sensory marketing is so specific that people recall the brand. Like there are few companies, a few brands are doing that, but they are doing it very impactful way. So it's very important how it is done also. Then also positive association with the brand, and also it gives a consumer satisfaction. So here I have mentioned the example of Apple. So if you see, Apple is a very simple, right? But at the same time, Apple is all about sensory marketing. So when you enter the Apple store, yeah, so you see that the all the gadgets are kept at a 70-degree angle. And why they are kept at that angle? Because they want the consumers to touch them and view and change the viewing angles. And when they will change the viewing angle, they will touch. When they touch, they will experience the touch, which is the signature of Apple. Apple touch is one of the most important sensory signature, right? So they want the consumer to experience the touch, the feel. That's the why they are keeping their gadgets at 70-degree, because they want the consumer to feel it, to experience it. Yeah. So this is all about sensory marketing. Let's move to the other one. So there is a quote by Nandu Nand Kishore. So he is an executive fellow at London Business School. As per him, many people misunderstand what branding is. They think branding is about having a big logo. That is not true. Branding is all about engaging, connecting with your consumers. It's the sum total of all the behavior, whatever you do, right? It's about the tone of your voice, the colors, the sound, the smell. Actually, it's all about using all the five senses, which help you to engage with the consumer. So you can see how impactful is the sensory marketing or sensory branding is. So what are the application of sensory marketing Okay, so we can use it innovation, like by creating a new proposition where the sensory attributes of the project and packaging enhance the brand positioning, or we can use in a renovation also. In case we want to see, we want to protect or improve our existing product through identifying the key sensory attributes to protect those that are driving the liking, but also the emotional and functional positioning of your brand. If there is some flexibility to change that, because there are something which are core in any of the brand and there are some flex. So is there any opportunity that we can work upon on the sensory marketing, can do on sensory marketing of the brand? So sensory marketing can be used for innovation as well as for the innovation. These are the various example. And where uh, if you see, these are the examples where the sensory marketing has been used. So cafe, I will call Starbucks, I already discussed. If you see the Harley Davidson, so Harley Davidson, the sound, so sound is again one of a sensory, right? So they did a patent on that because they have a particular sound. So when you the Harley Davidson is coming, the sound you get to know, okay, this is Harley Davidson. So they try to patent it. Yeah. Then you see the another example is the Coke. So in Coke, they Coke always do something different, right? So they try to stimulate your senses. So they this is a Diet Coke ad where they wanted to stimulate all your three senses, like your sound, your taste, and also the appearance or the sight. So what they were doing, they when in between when they were advertising it, you could feel the pouring of a coke in your screen, whether you are using a mobile or you are using a TV. So whenever the advertisement used to come, you just see that the coke pouring into your screen. At the same time, the sound, and finally they also giving a coupon at the end, then you can go and redeem it to a nearest Coke store kind of a thing. So they were stimulating all the three senses to market the product. The another example here you can see is the book. Okay, so like we are in a digital revolution is happening, we are using Kindle, we are reading book or listening books through your podcast and all. But if you ask a book reader who is really into books, the experience they get is by touching the book, by smelling the book. That is the real experience of for them to read the book. Yeah, so it's all about the experience, the sensory experience. It's just not about the reading, it's all about the touch, the feel, and the smell when they are reading the book. The last one is about the fabel. This is about how the same product sometimes, by presenting in a different way or by doing little bit extra, can help or cue premiumness. Yeah. So here if you see fabel, you see it's like very luxurious product, or you can see very handicrafted product. But it's how we are getting that by seeing the products, how they're presented, how they are created, how they are and what are the different shapes of it. So it's all about the presentation, it's all about the how they how what the surrounding where they are. So it's all about the luxury experience. Same product can give you the feel of a luxury or the premiumness. It's just all about which sensory or which sense you are stimulating. Yeah. So this is the last slide of my webinar. So maybe we talked about consume sensory, we talked about sensory, we talked about sensory, we talked about consumer, then how we are merging them together, then innovation, then sensory marketing. So as a student, you may have a question, right? Because as I told, this field is very niche in India. When I started also, I was not knowing where it is going to take me up, right? But I think there is a lot of opportunities in this field. So if you think to start a career in consumer and sensory research, you can have a great opportunity across different industries, especially in the FMCG. So if you are starting in this field, you start from a technician to analyst to scientist to the inside manager to the senior professional, right? And you have an opportunity to work across food processor, cosmetic and fragrances manufacturer, ingredient manufacturer, higher education, consumer and market research firms, self-employed or consultant kind of a thing. And you can do a different kind of a job, like you can work very closely to the technical team, with technical team. You can perform analyze report, right? You can do troubleshooting, you do insight mining, you can work with in the R&D strategies and all. So I think there is a lot of opportunity in this field. And I really encourage people to think it's just not about the product development or the quality or a production. This is another function which is really very interesting and have a lot of opportunities. So yeah, this is all about consumer and sensory science. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Really, the presentation was commendable, and we have the audience members in the comment section saying that it was a very lovely session. And mainly, the examples that you gave were very relatable, and that gave us a nice insight into this topic. So, thank you once again.
Thank you so much. Any particular question? I think yeah, we extended the
Um,
time. I know. Any question?
yes. Yes, we have some questions from the audience. We'll start with the first. So, ma'am, can we call the aftertaste as the mouthfeel, or are these two different things?
These two are different. Yeah, so mouthfeel is all about like a consistency, right? It's all about the physical chemical, how the product react into your mouth. Aftertaste is what remains. So once you take a product completely inside your throat, then whatever remaining in the throat is the aftertaste.
Okay, right, ma'am. So, the next question we have is some restaurants provide us appetizers that increase our appetite for the dish at the start. So, what exactly is the role of appetizers according to you?
Okay, that's very interesting question actually. Okay, maybe, so frankly speaking, I haven't had a chance to experience these product, but it's maybe I have no idea on this. Sorry for that. But maybe it's like they may stimulate your senses, right? They may stimulate your senses, and that's why I think the portion is very important. So they are not giving you a lot of products, they are just giving you a few products, right? Or the portion is very small, they stimulate your senses, but not fulfilling all the, what you can say, not satisfying them. That's the reason you get, you want more and more, and then you eat more. That may be the reason. Yeah.
Right. So, ma'am, the next question is, could you share with us some tips for improving the sensory evaluation skills?
Okay, sensory evaluation, there is no particular tip. It comes with the experience, right? And also once you taste more and more number of samples, and also focus on each and every senses. Okay, when you start from the appearance, then your aroma, and then your taste, then mouth feel, then aftertaste, and with time you will it will help you to enhance your sensory skills. Yeah, some people are really born, so they are really super tasters. There are some people, they are like they cannot taste too much, or they are not having that kind of, because it's all about genetics, right? And there are 50% of people, they are normal taster. For normal taster, it's all about how much samples you are tasting, more frequent, how frequently you are tasting, how you are focusing on those things. So yeah, it's about more
Right.
exposure to the products.
Okay. Ma'am, at what temperature and humidity should the sensory evaluation be done in general, or are these two factors not relevant in sensory evaluation?
It's very important. Temperature and humidity are important. Yeah, generally we say 21 plus minus 3 kind of a thing. And it is where we are conducting the sensory, whereas it also depend upon what temperature you are serving the product. If it is a cold drink or it's a beverage, it's the recommended at around 11 to 14 kind of a thing, right? So it depends upon what category you are dealing, and the how, and it's very important for you to serve the product at that temperature. Whereas when you are doing a sensory evaluation, it need to be done at 21 plus minus 2 3 degrees centigrade temperature. Yeah.
Okay. So, ma'am, in food industries, which of the sensory evaluation methods is mostly used out of all the ones you mentioned today?
I depend upon the categories. Yeah, so even depend upon the industry. Like I think the most commonly used one is you just do a triangle test, or you do a tetra test for the sensory. And if you have a trained panel, you use a QDA, right? You profile the products. And in consumer research, you do both qual and quant. Both qualitative and quantitative tests are used to get insights.
Right, ma'am. So, ma'am, there is a electronic nose being used in the industries nowadays. Could you tell us a little bit about this interesting concept and how relevant or useful could that be?
Yeah, I remember when I started in 2010 or 12, that time electronic nose, I could, you know, I remember that time people were talking about that, right? And maybe some of the companies may be using that, but I haven't seen that it getting often used. Why? Because it's just an instrument, right? Whereas our consumers are not an instrument, right? We are using senses, and senses when we are using is all about interaction of the senses, and then only we are giving a feedback. Okay, so e-nose, I feel, I'm not sure because I haven't went back and checked how it is doing and all, but I haven't seen that getting used kind of a thing, whichever company I have worked, or whosoever I'm interacting with. So this is not that much successful because of, it's an instrument, right? And we want to get a feedback from the human and want to be more closer to the consumer. So
So, working with live audience is much better.
yes, because we have analytical tools, right? In case of you want to understand the moisture, so we already have analytical tools, right? So how it is
Right.
differentiating? Yes, sometimes we use our GC, like GC olfactory and all in flavor houses and all, just to understand the aroma part of it, but not for everything, because then you need to have a e tongue, you need to have a e nose, so you need to have different instrument, right? Versus when a human is evaluating, they are evaluating on the holistic basis. Yeah.
Right, ma'am.
And also it depend upon which industry. Like if you're in the aroma industry, maybe if you are in the aroma industry, like GC olfactory can help you. Okay. When you are in a texture industry, maybe you can use an e-tongue, right? Or maybe when you are working on a particular ingredient on a texture, maybe e-tongue can help you, right? So it depend
Right.
on which industry. Yeah.
Okay. So, moving ahead, ma'am, is it possible that a product fails in other shelf life testing parameters, but it passes in the sensory part? What is done in such a situation?
So like sometimes what happens, the product get passed. So we need to consider both, even the microbial and also the sensory part of it, right? So if it passes in sensory but microbial, it is failed, right? Because that is very important for us, because it's all about the safety of the consumers. Yeah. But in case it is passing in micro but failing in sensory, then also it should not be taken ahead, because at the end it is going to impact the overall liking of the consumer. Yeah.
Right. So, both are important.
Yes.
So, ma'am, the last question for today, what is any one course or training available or would you recommend any course on a personal basis?
Yeah, I know that question. I get a lot when people interact with me. In India, I don't foresee any institute is providing that sensory particular training kind of a thing. But yes, CFTRI is there where you get some basic course on sensory. So they organize some of the sessions. Otherwise, like most of the people, they learn on job. So but whosoever is currently the food sensory scientist or the sensory analyst and all, they have learned on the job. So the company, they go take they give them opportunity to learn and to experiment. So whatever we have learned on job.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
So, with this, ma'am, you've answered almost all the questions that we had. It was a very lovely session. And once again, on behalf of Foodyaari, I'd like to thank you for your efforts, your time, and the lovely participants that we had throughout this session. Thank you. And with this, I end this live webinar session.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.
Yes.